Greetings to our Brubaker cousins in North America. I am Ken Brubaker, and I presently serve as the president of the Brubaker Families of America Board. Welcome to the 98th Brubaker reunion. It first began in 1919 and met regularly thereafter. There was a hiatus of 4 years when they could not meet during World War II. The board struggled with whether or not we should have our reunion in person this year. Fortunately or unfortunately as it may be, the COVID virus, being very contagious and deadly, made the decision for us. Thanks to modern technology, the board decided that rather than cancel the meeting, we should have a virtual meeting. And I'm sure many of you have had experiences during the past several months or more of having committee meetings and board meetings and what have you meetings virtually. So we will be doing that today as you are observing. Unfortunately, those that enjoy the close connections with our cousins at the in-person meetings, I give you my apologies that you will not be able to have any hugs or handshakes or sharing personal family stories, meeting cousins you've never met before, and sharing food together. However, let's be positive and hope that next year we can have an in-person reunion again. For our agenda today, we have a very busy agenda, and our first speaker is cousin Dennis Oberholtzer. Dennis is a very passionate historian and genealogist. He is going to spend his first presentation regarding the Swiss Germans traveling up or down the Rhine River. It seems like it's up when you look at the map, but it's actually down to the Netherlands, and from there over to London, and from London they boarded a ship to Philadelphia. Welcome, Dennis.
Well, good day to all the Brubakers. And my name is Dennis Oberholzer, as Ken said, and I come from three lines of the Brubakers here in Lancaster County. One is the A line, the other is the B line, and also the D line. This video is the first part of three that we're planning on doing on how the Brubakers came to America. And what was it like in Switzerland when, and in the 1600s and the 1700s, as they were being persecuted and pushed out of the beautiful Alps that we know today. The Anabaptist movement was primarily the reason and the purpose of the persecutions. The Catholic Church and even some of the Reformation churches did not care for the Anabaptist beliefs that our ancestors had. The Anabaptist literally means, for the younger people, I'll explain a little, the Anabaptist literally meant against baby baptism. Baby baptism is something that is done in the Catholic Church, and the Bible never says that that is a legitimate thing. The problem with baby baptism is that the Bible consistently throughout, from the beginning to end, gives each individual person the opportunity to make their own decisions as to whether they would accept the creator of the universe. And therefore, our ancestors believed that we needed to separate ourselves in our religious beliefs in that category. So that was a long-term problem that existed over hundreds of years, that persecutions continued on and off basis in certain areas of the area of the continent of Europe. In the quick push out of Switzerland came in the 1600s, where a lot of people were being not just thrown in jail, but even Hans Landis, many of our families are descended from him. He was beheaded in 1614. He was the last person to be beheaded in Switzerland. But his son, Hans Jr., which we call Hans II, was along with a Peter Brubaker and a Rudolph that were persecuted and thrown in prison in 1637. So there's a lot of ties in all the Anabaptist movement. And a lot of them were burghers and bauers, which were landowners in Switzerland. And that gave extra incentive for the government people to persecute them and confiscate their properties so that they could become rich, and they used the Anabaptist movement as an excuse to do so. So what I want to show is the progression out of Switzerland. And I'm going to turn it over to a lot of pictures and let you look at some pictures as I explain our trek from Switzerland down to the Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and then over to London, and then over to here. There's some interesting little quirks, and as we look at the pictures, we can see some of these quirks and get a better understanding of some of the things that took place. And the first one is the picture of the nation of Switzerland as it is today. And we came from the Lake Zurich area, which is in the northeast corner of Switzerland. And it's long Finger Lake with Zurich on the north side. And the Brubakers came from just about an hour south of Zurich in a little town called Zollikofen. And there's a stream about an hour from there which goes away from the lake, and that's where their name came from. The name Brug, Bach, Brug meaning bridge, and Bach meaning a mountain stream. So we have a bridge over a mountain stream is where our house was originally located, where the family originated from. From there, the family spread to Hurleyburg, which was a little further south on the lake, and then to Waddenswil, which is on the opposite side of the lake. And from there, those three different areas, the Brubakers left and went to the Palatinate. Now, the Palatinate was originally from the tribe of the Suevi tribe, which are the German tribe. And years later, they were called the Allemands, or the Alemanni, and that's a French term meaning all men, because by the 1st century AD, the Alemanni no longer were tall and thin with long red hair, but they had incorporated people from all the different tribes around that were refugees, and they took them in. And so the tribe after the 1st century AD was more amalgamated with a lot of different body chemistries, with dark hair, with short people, with tall people. And from there, the Alemannis went to the eastern end of France in the 3rd, 4th century. From there, I'm giving a quick overview. And from there, they were conquered by the Franks, and Clovis made a deal, cut a deal, and they went to Switzerland, and most of them moved up into the mountains. The people, the Helvetians, were the people that were the lake dwellers of Switzerland prior to the Alemanni coming there. So if we would take our DNA and do some testing way back in time, we would probably be able to see that we are part Helvetian and part Alemanni. Anyway, if we go back up to the 1600s and we got pushed into the Palatinate, I have a picture of, I hope it comes up, a picture of the one of the large government buildings in Heidelberg is the name of the town that was in the Palatinate, that was started by the Hohenstaufen dynasty. Conrad was the brother to Frederick I Barbarossa, Hohenstaufen, and Frederick gave the Palatinate to Conrad, and he started the town of Heidelberg, which was the main seat of authority for the Palatinate for several years, several centuries. By the 1600s, the amount of wars have, especially the 30-year war in the early 1600s, devastated the lands of the Palatinate. The buildings were burnt, the fields were burnt, and the economic situation was rather dire. And so the local authorities welcomed the Anabaptists down to that area in order to replenish the farms and be able to bring food supplies back up to the levels they needed to feed their city people in the towns and the cities. And that went well for a couple generations. And so the area of the Palatinate was fairly well taken over by a lot of the Anabaptist people. But the French and some of the other warring localities, local jurisdictions still wanted to persecute the Anabaptists. And so they were looking for relief, and William Penn worked his way up, starting in 1677, worked his way up the Rhine River and started to visit both the Quaker meetinghouses in the area of the Rhine River, but also speak with some of the Anabaptists and invite them to come to Penn's Woods, which we call Pennsylvania today. That was a good sign for them, but there was a lot of hesitation by the Anabaptists because it was all new. They didn't really have the enough people backing them to be able to just pick up and go. So they needed something, and God sent a series of frosts for several years. During 1707, 8, 9, and 11, they had frosts that were so bad that they wiped out the grain crop in the middle of the summer. And so food shortages became rather large. During that time, the Spanish were bringing potatoes from South America. Potatoes were unknown to the rest of the world. And they were bringing potatoes in and trying to get the Europeans to plant potatoes, but the Europeans didn't like that idea. So they ended up sending the potatoes to Ireland, and the Irish welcomed them because they were in dire need of food. And so when 1707 to 1709, when the big push to get out of Europe and find food, the Queen of England invited them to come to London and then take a trip to America. Problem was getting there. In order to get there, they had to go down the Rhine River. There were at least 23 toll stops that are known of small castles built along the river that had their own toll booths on the river, and they would have to pay tolls. So by the time they got to Rotterdam, where they would get on a ship to go to London, a lot of their money was depleted from all the tolls. So when they did get to Rotterdam, they would most likely jump the Dutch ships and then go to London. When they got to London, there was 10 to 30,000 people that immigrated from 1707 to 1709. It was a huge influx of people, and the problem was they didn't have enough ships to go to America, for one. Two, a lot of the people were too poor. They couldn't even afford the funds that were needed to take the ship. So the Queen of England sent 10,000 of them to Ireland to wreak out a subsistence living off of potatoes and what have you. And so we find that even today there are still families from the Anabaptist movement that live in an area on the western Kilkenny and some of the other towns on the western side of Ireland that they stayed and they never left, and some did manage to make their way over to America years later. The ships that they used to come over here were based on the Galenese ship. Okay, here's a picture of the Galasee boats that were built by the Spanish, and the thing that's important for the English ships is that English incorporated the bottom part of the ship in order to build their new ships, and the reason for this was that they would go more smoothly through the rough waters. On top of that, they were able to add more area to the ship. Up until the 1600s, they were pretty much dependent on ships that only could hold 50 to 70 people, whereas these new styles of ships, you could get 200 passengers on to come to America, which was really beneficial. So you can go to the next picture and get a good glimpse of the size of the ship. So we're able to bring the passenger lists that are still existent today, show anywhere from 170 to 240 people on these ships in the early 1700s on their way to America. So that should be all for now.
Thanks, Dennis, for your presentation. It certainly sounded like our ancestors had a very arduous, difficult travel going from Switzerland to Pennsylvania. Our next event is very special, as we have our cousin Eileen Johns interview our cousin Bob Knowle. Now, Bob Knowle celebrated his 100th birthday on the 5th of April this year. What's also interesting about Bob is not only his age and his sharpness, he also lives on land that was originally deeded to Hans Brubacher back in 1717.
We're pleased to have Brubacher cousin Robert Brubacher Noll. He will be turning 100 in a few weeks, or a few months, correct?
Weeks.
In a few weeks he will be turning 100 years old. He is from the A branch of the larger Brubacher family. He was born right here on the original family homestead, of which the home we're sitting in now is still occupying part of the original family homestead that was originally warranted to the Brubacher family by William Penn back in 1717.
Today I'm going to ask Bob about how he came to live in this area of the world. and I think he will have some very good insight. Bob?
Hello. First, I want to begin with how blessed I am to be planted in Hempfield Township through the blessings brought by Hans Brubacher when he came to this area of the world. Lancaster County and Hempfield Township are some of the best places anyone could live. My mother was a Brubacher, and that's how I got planted into the Brubacher family. My grandfather, Chris Brubacher, owned the farm where I grew up. And I was used to the way of farming almost 100 years ago. My grandfather was a teamster. He operated his wagon and horses on the roads and hauled rails and poles to build trolley lines.
I heard you mention something about your father with his ways of farming that influenced you.
Well, he wasn't afraid of his own shadow.
Okay,
That I can tell you.
okay. And something about horsepower? Were you
Well,
farming then?
He drove, well, when Grandpa Brubaker
Yeah.
left the
Our
farm,
grandpa, yeah,
the teams and everything was still there.
yes.
And then Dad drove the team.
And was that a
Six.
team of 6 horses? Were they
6
horses?
mules.
Mules. I thought they
And
were.
I drove them too sometimes in the fields
Oh,
when I was a kid, and I wasn't very big either.
wow.
I drove them scraping up potatoes, and with a cultivator, a hand walk behind cultivator, Dan Sigmund and I did that a lot
Okay,
in the cornfield.
okay.
But
Well, when did he start getting mechanical assistance? When did the tractors come into the
well,
scene?
and my dad got it 1923. In 1920, that's the year he bought the farm.
Okay,
My dad bought the farm from Chris Brubaker
correct.
in 1923.
I see.
And right away, he got a refrigerator. Well, he got Landis Brubaker, that's my mom's cousin,
Yes,
Titus and Levi's brother.
yes.
He put the electric in
He
there
was
in
an
1923.
He was an electrician, right?
Yeah, he went
Yes.
to Chicago to a school to learn to install electricity. And who'd have believed, as strict as he was about religion and stuff, that he'd have went to college. I couldn't believe it, but that's what. And I have a book if you want to read about him. His son told me at the reunion.
Okay,
18 bucks I think I paid for it.
okay.
Yeah, he lives out in Kansas or someplace now.
Mhm.
He joined the strict group,
Okay.
and they spread out all over everywhere.
Mhm.
But
That was the first thing he bought was a refrigerator.
uh,
A refrigerator, is that the
Oh,
first
yeah.
thing he bought?
after we had electric,
And a hot water heater.
no, that
No,
was
was
a
that
bucket
late?
a day still.
Oh, a bucket a day.
Yeah, a bucket
Now-
of coal a day. Had hot water.
Okay.
Wasn't a bad idea.
It was a
A
great
lot
idea.
cheaper.
Yep.
If we didn't think it was cheap then.
And then he bought that for the house, then how about his equipment for the farming?
Well, the first thing I was starting to say was he bought this 1923
Yeah,
Fordson tractor.
okay.
And they were killing people right and left. The people would hook something on them above the axle instead of on the drawbar,
Okay,
and to pull them, when they pull hard, they pull back over and kill the guy.
well,
They were it was their own fault,
well, I guess.
but they
didn't-
wanted to give it more traction or whatever. They had it
They
on.
probably didn't read their instruction book,
Yeah. Well, you read that after you can't get it going.
but if you're dead, you can't.
Well, that killed, and they tried to pull tree stumps with it,
Okay,
and that's when it happened, that kind of stuff that it can't pull,
okay,
trying to make it pull,
alright.
jerk it,
Uh-huh.
just that quick it's on top of it.
Okay,
And they couldn't start them, or you can crank them things till your eyeballs stick out. And they don't start, and they had all kind of hot shots and stuff they hooked up to them. I saw my dad cranking that thing. My gosh. I got the home farm because I was the oldest son.
I see,
I was the firstborn son.
okay. And you had a
And
brother,
that, I
Ken?
think, well, and my mother, who was Esther Brubaker,
Yes,
Doug knows that name.
yes.
She had twins after I was born.
And their
2
name,
years later, she had twins,
John and Jane.
John and Jane, yeah.
Okay,
And that made my mom really busy. In 1949 is when I took the farm over from
okay.
the same farm that I was born on. And my family, went the whole way back to the day that Hans Brubaker bought his tract of land.
Right,
I just bought the farm,
yeah,
not long at all.
right.
And I had no money to buy an airplane, but the guy that I bought an airplane, I had said that.
Mm-hmm,
But then Marty Moore from Lidditz had this plane. He bought it to learn to fly, that's what he did.
okay.
Then he wanted to sell it after he knew how to fly.
Oh,
He'd got something better then. And I told him I'd like a chance at it. And I wasn't expecting all this farm deal and stuff going at one time. I thought this would be a year or a couple till he gets around with the airplane. One day he flew it in and landed in the field above the house. Well, he said he's ready to sell the airplane. He wants $800 for it. Oh man, I ain't got any money. No, I said, I'll give you 600. I don't know why I said that, because I ain't going to even afford that. I had some steers in the barn. I farmed the farm on the halves with my dad then,
okay,
but I still had, I would own the steers. So I thought, now I'm rid of that, got rid of that deal. I would like to have the airplane, but I couldn't afford it. Well, lo and behold, 6 weeks later, he come back on Saturday afternoon, landed in the same place. Well, I'll take 600. I'm ready to sell it, I want 600. So he and I got in my car and drove up Columbia Avenue to the square and got a bill of sale. I had an airplane. In the meantime, that 6 week period, I sold some steers. I had the money in the bank
oh,
then.
okay, alright.
So I gave him a check, and that's the last I ever talked to Marty Moore. I don't know where he got to or anything, but so that's how I got the airplane.
And by now, your parents knew about the airplane.
Yeah, and then he took off. Somebody's wife come and got him and left the airplane there. It was, I parked it near the tobacco shed. That next week it started raining. This thing sitting out in the rain, it rained for a whole week. And while it was doing that, I started building an airplane shed.
A shed.
Yeah, to put it in, because I didn't want an airplane sitting out, and Roy Gelt said it's just like hanging your Sunday suit out under a tree when you're not wearing it.
I see.
That's what he told me.
Right, makes sense.
That didn't sound very good to me.
No.
Anyway, I put a footer in and put it up against the wagon shed. And Andrew Brubaker was the architect that built that shed,
I didn't know that.
where I built my airplane hangar right against it. And the lumber for that shed came from a covered bridge over the Susquehanna that a hurricane blew down. And they salvaged the wood and sold it to farmers. That's what that shed was built out of. Now getting back to flying. My dad, I built a gable end truss in the tobacco shed while it was raining. And I got everything ready. And my dad come over and helped me to build it.
So
He never said a word about it.
So he was in
Huh?
favor.
He was a bright looking head guy.
Yep.
Yeah. And I flew him twice up over the mountains so he could see the cabin. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the kind of dad I had, and that's why I like him.
Nice.
But I took 625 people for rides. You were
I was
one
one of them. I was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
600.
I loved
that
it.
sounds like a lot to me.
That is a lot. And how do you know that you took that many people?
Because I wrote it down.
Because you wrote it down.
And the date.
Great.
I can tell you when I took you, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it was at a family reunion. I know that.
The what?
A family reunion.
Oh, yeah.
That was when you did
That
it.
was the center of attraction.
That was great.
Even more than the chicken barbecue. Yeah.
So I think you and I can both be grateful that we were allowed to do what we did, to leave the monument for all generations
Yeah.
to be
Well,
able to
I-
know what we knew. And
That
we won't be here to tell the stories, but they can see the monument with the plaque on it. And to me,
yeah.
that's our legacy.
You and I were together there, and a lot of people around when you took a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But then the people moved away, and my family took a picture.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly my generation people that I was the oldest one
Your
of
descendants.
all them people.
Yeah.
I could hardly believe that I had that many descendants.
Yes. It's
in-
great.
in
Pictures
my
are
lifetime.
wonderful. Yep.
When they were all there together, it looked like a lot of people.
It was a lot of people. Yes.
And
Yes.
that made me think, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Cousin Eileen and Cousin Bob. That was a very interesting interview. I would like to make several comments because I did have an opportunity to meet with Bob several weeks ago. What an interesting person. I have, in my career, met many centenarians, but few were as sharp as a tack as was Bob in my conversations with him. He was a very special person. He was a very bright guy that was very creative. And one of the things he would do is if he could not buy something, he would make it. And he could make lots of things that I could share if we had more time. So thanks again, Eileen and Bob. I really appreciate the interview. Our next item that's on our agenda is we're going to again hear from our cousin Dennis Oberholtzer. If you remember, he took us down the Rhine and over to Pennsylvania at Philadelphia, and from there, the Brubakers started their one-foot trip to Lancaster, which is about 60 miles away. And he will take us from Lancaster to Christiana, which was very close to Quarryville, for those that know Lancaster County. So welcome again, Dennis.
Okay, we are ready for part 2 of our journey from Switzerland to Lancaster County with the Brubakers, and we are out in the middle of the ocean on our way to Philadelphia from London. These journeys took anywhere from 3 to 6 months. There was one case where there was a group of ships of 4,000 people, and they took 6 months to get to New York City. And by the time they got there, they had lost 1,700 of the 4,000 people. This was not for the lighthearted. It was a very, very difficult trip, especially when you have that many people crammed into a ship. And oftentimes in the bottom of the ship, they had to stay for long periods of time where they had almost no light, and burning flames, which took a lot of oxygen and what have you. So they had a tough time just trying to make it over here. One example of someone who is probably related to many in our families, and that is a John Mann down in Quarryville, down in Manor Township. His father died in Germany, and his mother decided to bring him, when he was only about 1.5 years old, to America. As they were coming across on the ship, the mother died. And so what they did is they would wrap them in a blanket and give them last rites and throw the body overboard so that they wouldn't contaminate by disease the rest of the passengers on the ship. The other kink to this is up until 1795, approximately, it was the 1790s, there was an international law finally put into place that stopped this next event from happening. And that event was that when a parent or guardian of a child that was on the ship would die and they would throw them overboard, if there was no one on the ship to take the child or children in as a guardian and to raise them, the child or children would be cast alive overboard into the hands of God. This is shocking, but I found this in a records of this John Mann family, which I happen to descend from, and fortunately for him, the Stamen family took him in and raised him in the Willis Street area, and he went down into Manor Township and eventually bought a farm as an adult. Those types of things went on from the beginning of history, and it's just not talked about, it's not heard of, and those kind of shocking things make you realize how important it is for family structures. Anyway, we're on our way from London. We make our way across in about 3 months, the Brubakers did, and they made it to Philadelphia. Some historians thought that the first settlers came into Newcastle, Delaware, but that's not correct. They went into Philadelphia. Penn's Landing is the name of the docks along the edge of Philadelphia. Penn's Landing was very primitive when the first settlers came, but they managed to dock there, and they came in, and they had to walk after getting off the boat. They had to pledge allegiance to the government, and then they had to walk about 4 miles to the Arch Street meeting house, which was a Quaker meeting house, which they probably stayed overnight. And then from there, they went another about 4 miles to Germantown. Germantown is where the first German settlers began their life in the 1780s. And we want to take a picture, we want to start looking at pictures now of the Germantown area and the Quakers, what the Quakers had built before the Germans were coming over in droves. So this is the Arch Street Meeting House as it is today. It's a brick building with brick walls around. At the time the Brubakers came over, it was probably a log building, but it was still on the same lot of land. So we can go to the next one, and we get to see what Germantown looked like. This is the map of how we got to Germantown on the far left corner, where the big black line stops. That's the area of Germantown. You can go on up to the next, and you can go up another one. There we go. Now this is Germantown Square, and of course, when they first came over, it was just wooden buildings, and the red brick building behind the church there is now the Historical Society, and that had a bit of government influence when it was first built. You can go on to another one, and this is this is the historical building. And then the next picture is across the street, and it's about a half a block wide in this area of Germantown Square. Now, if you notice the stone pavement, they were the ballast in the bottom of the boats, and they had to put them in so that the boat wouldn't overturn in the heavy seas coming across the Atlantic Ocean. But once they got here, they would take them out and had no use for them, because they would load the boats back up with goods, furs and nuts, and also grain and that type of thing to go back to Europe. So these ballasts just kept accumulating until they began to use them for paving stone. And now if we go to the next picture, this is another part of the Germantown Square, and then the next one we will see the Quakertown Meetinghouse just to the south of Germantown Square. This was already built, not completely, but it was in part built by the early 1700s, and it's still there today. And this is where they would meet with William Penn and some of the other authorities, like the surveyors and that type of thing, to decide what areas of property they wished to purchase in Lancaster County. From here, they stayed overnight with the German people that stayed in the area, and would get their supplies ready to make their trek into Lancaster, which was originally called Conestoga. What's interesting is that the very first people that came to Conestoga did not have horses, they did not have wagons of any sort. They walked in, and they could only travel about 4 miles a day because they were carrying a long pole with a metal pot at the end with a cover on it that would keep the coals burning. Okay, here's a picture of the Schuylkill River. This is across from Fort Manayunk. Fort Manayunk was about 8 city blocks away from Germantown, and so they were pretty much in safety from anything west of that while they were at Germantown. When they got here just at Fort Manayunk, as you can see, there's some stones sticking out, protruding out from the land, and that was part of the original dock of the first ferry. The first ferry went from here across the river to the other side, and this was the only way to get across the Schuylkill River for about 3 decades. And then finally the second ferry took place down in Darby, and that's where the majority of the traffic went to after it came into use. But at this time, it was kind of an arduous trek because they had to go across here, and then you can hit the next picture and you can see the size of the hill that the ferry would go to. You can see the size of the hill on the right hand side there, and they had to go up that hill. Now the next picture is a map that is the Heritage Trail that they show from the river on the left-hand corner, upper left-hand corner there. They had to go up the hill, and you can see that little stretch of green that comes up between the cemeteries, and that was the path that they came till they get up to the top. At the where the cemeteries stop here in the lower part of the picture, the land levels out there, and then they had a rather easy trek over to the next Quaker Meetinghouse, which was the Marion Meetinghouse, and that next picture will show that, and the road going right beside it. Marion Meetinghouse was built in 1695, so that was almost 2 decades, good 18 years before the Brubakers got here, and it was even over a decade before the first German settlers that came to Conestoga in 1710. So this is already showing that the road was already in place before the settlers came to Conestoga, whereas there was no road even started from down in Delaware. As we go to the next picture, we see Williston. Well, this is also the Marion Meetinghouse from the opposite side. The Jones family, there are 3 Jones families that are buried in this cemetery beside here, and the one Jones family was the largest land owner of Penn's Woods in the early years, and he was instrumental in laying the groundwork for the German settlers to come into Conestoga. Now, as we go across the Goshen Road from this area, they had to go north to toward Montgomery County, but they didn't go very far, and then they headed west, and they came on to what they call the Goshen Road. It was actually originally one of the Minqua trails, and the reason they called it Goshen Road, I believe, they wanted to keep the German settlers from intermingling too much with the English, because they didn't know if there was going to be problems with the clashes of the different peoples. William Penn's experiment was to have the Mennonites in northern Lancaster County, which are also called Anabaptist. He planted Irish to the north and the west, and Protestant Irish in southern Lancaster County as a border, so to speak, from the Catholics that lived in Maryland. And his holy experiment was to try and keep the people separated just enough that they could, over time, amalgamate without causing conflict. And it was a very successful outcome to that here in America. So as we go to the next picture, we see Williston, and Williston is on the Goshen Road at Providence Road. Providence Road goes north to Downingtown, and this church, this Quaker church, was built in 1703. The road going from here, going west, did not exist at this time, but it did still have the Minqua Trail, so they continued on the Minqua Trail, but it wasn't wide enough for carriages and wagons and that type of thing. As we go to the next picture, we get to see some of the landscape that really hasn't changed a lot. The only thing is there were meadows, and open grasslands. The thing that's drastically different is that the trees, when the first settlers came over, are recorded as being twice as tall as they are today. They were anywhere from 175 to 230 feet tall. I myself personally know this to be true because I tore a couple barns down, and the main beam in the base of the barns was 80 feet long on both the barns. The one was the Binkley and Ober barn where they quarried limestone in East Petersburg, and they were 18 by 18 inches thick, and you can't get that large of a log without having a 180 to 230 foot tall Douglas fir tree. So the trees were definitely twice as tall as they were. They were wide, 6, 8, even 10 feet wide at the base, and they cast large, long shadows over the ground in the evening and in the morning, and this creates a lot of superstition. And so Lancaster County is noted for its hex signs for generations, and only in the last 50 to 60 years, a lot of the hex signs, most of the hex signs have gone from the county. But the superstitions were definitely brought over from Germany, and the long shadows from the trees were definitely part of it also. Our next picture shows the Brandywine Creek. Up until 1724, there were no bridges on the trail from Philadelphia to Lancaster. So everything had to be carried through the water, and on the Brandywine Creek there was no what you call a ford, which was a very shallow area that they could cross. So it was not an easy trek to go through this water, because they had to go down the hill to begin with, to go through the water and then up the other side. As we go to the next picture, we are looking at land west of Parksburg, and this seems insignificant, but the settlers had to go south a little bit from what is today Parksburg and follow that tree line at the base of the tree line there over to what is today Atglen, because that's where the Christiana Creek is, and they had to get water in order to survive as on their trip. And the Strasbourg Road today goes north of here and has no place to get any water at all. So they went south, went across here, and then came up through what is today Atglen, up into Christiana to get up to the Strasbourg Road. The reason this is significant is because water is the mainstay of any trip, and today we can take this trip from Christiana to Lancaster in a half an hour easily in our car, but to do it back when the original settlers came, it took 4 days of walking. And wagons, by 1724, there was still, it's recorded in 1844 in the history of Lancaster County, that there was only one wagon per whole neighborhood of farms by 1724. In 1733, James Logan designed the Conestoga wagon, which began to be built in Lancaster County, and there were, in a few years, they were up to building 7,000 wagons per year. But there is a long haul between 1710 and 1717 when the Brubakers came, and then clear on up to 1724. There still was not a lot of travel taking place in the area of Conestoga. The next picture shows the Christiana Meetinghouse, and that wasn't built until 1737, but the Quakers were residing here as a stopover for the German settlers as they came back up, and the Strasbourg Road is only about a half a mile north of here. The next picture is along the front of this, off to the side of this meeting house. It's a rare glimpse of a carriage stop. We don't see many of those. There's not many of it in existence anymore, but this enabled the ladies to get in and out of the carriage without a lot of trouble. And I just felt it was something that we wanted to see, because you just don't see many of those today, and most people wouldn't have a clue what it even is. Okay, that's our trip into Christiana, and the next trip will be from there into this area.
So our next agenda item will be more of entertainment than maybe historical information. The entertainment is a very fun, interesting video that Connor McKenney did during the 300th year anniversary of Brubaker's coming to America. He titled the video, "Who's That Brubaker?" And you'll enjoy the comedy that goes with that. So we will now listen to Connor and his interviewing Brubakers during the reunion we had in 2017.
Hello, I'm Connor Brubaker. At the 300th anniversary of our coming to America, I wanted to meet and talk to a variety of Brubakers at the celebration. Come along with me on a journey through history.
Hello, I'm Connor Brubaker, and welcome to Who's That Brubaker? And what are your names?
Mine is Bob Brubaker.
Mine is Richard Brubaker.
Bob and Richard?
Mary Ellen Brubaker.
Mary Ellen Brubaker and Gerald Brubaker.
I am Rachel Brubaker George.
Rachel Brubaker George.
Sharon Brubaker Hines.
Where are you from?
I'm from Mountjoy, Pennsylvania.
Mountjoy, so not very far, not too far.
That's right. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
So we're right, you didn't have to go far at all.
Montana.
Montana, okay.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay.
Canton, Georgia.
Canton, Georgia, okay.
And Canton, Georgia.
Canton, Georgia. Okay. Lennox, okay, so pretty close.
From Ohio.
From Ohio, where at?
Akron, Ohio.
Akron, Ohio.
Well, I'm actually from Streetsboro, Ohio.
Okay. We even have people from Europe, from the Netherlands, from Canada, all over. In the 1980 film Brubaker with Robert Redford, what was your favorite scene from the film?
I did not see that. I have no idea. It was too long ago. I'm too old.
This is basic Brubaker knowledge.
I know.
I don't remember.
No, I didn't watch that.
All right, it's on Netflix, so That was part of the prerequisite to come, so you might have to leave.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just kidding. You can stay. What was it like coming over on the boat the first time?
Well, since we weren't on the boat, I'm sure it was very rough and rocky.
Was it cold? Stormy. Okay.
Very wet.
It was very wet.
Well, Hans must have liked the boat ride because he went back and forth. He got frequent sailor money.
That's right. And you're true Brubakers.
Yes.
Okay, a true baker. if
We
you
even
will.
got our reunion in Smithville, Ohio, and that was, what, 3-4 weeks ago?
Yeah, we had 70-some people at our
Okay,
reunion.
double reunion.
And we
Yeah.
had ours goes back how many years?
90 years? Okay, 90 years.
90 years, all right. Why are you excited to be here this weekend?
I just want to figure out what line you were from.
Okay, which line? Okay. Do you know what line you're from? I've heard
The James.
The James.
James one, okay.
I'm from the B line.
The B line, okay.
And I would be from the B line too because we're second cousins.
Yes.
Okay. Do any of you know any classic Brubaker songs?
When righty galley, I was stuck to Molly. Once gravelly gator, galley, whoops, and his foot would go down and he'd fall on the floor and laugh and start again.
That's more than I know. Wow. All right.
Thanks, Connor, for that very energizing entertainment you gave us. I must admit that some things were striking in that interview with the Brubakers, I believe from Ohio, when they started singing Rider Out of Golly. I have not heard of that, but my wife is from Illinois and she grew up with that childhood rhyme or whatever you want to call it. It'd be interesting if we were in person to know how many people may have heard that, because I suspect that probably a lot of people had often entertained their small children by Rider Out of Golly. Our next presentation is the third part of the three inputs that our cousin Dennis Oberholtzer was doing. And if you remember, we cut off at Christiana, which was close to and in Lancaster County. The last leg of the trip, one foot, was to the city of Lancaster at that time, or close by. And this is the portion where the Brubakers bought 500 acres of ground in 1717. So welcome the third time, Dennis, to share the end of their long journey from Switzerland to Lancaster.
Okay, we're ready for part 3 of our trip from Switzerland to Lancaster County, which was called Conestoga at the time. And we were in Christiana, and we left Christiana, and we head to the west. And we're taking about 4 miles a day, so it took about 4 days to go from Christiana into west of Lancaster, where a lot of the homesteads, especially the Brubaker homestead, was. On the way there, we come across to Strasbourg, and Strasbourg did not exist at the time. It was just being started. A couple of houses were being built there. But there was a inn, and the inn had a butcher shop in it, where the Strasbourg Road turns to the north, and the road going to Lampeter and also the Willow Street settlement continued on straight. Right in that intersection is where the inn was. It was used for many years. The drovers used to bring their cattle from Chester County into Strasbourg to this inn, and they would be slaughtered there as a butcher shop. As you pass that and head north on the Strasbourg Road, you come through an area called Weisenthal, and we want to take a look at this picture of the Johann Anton Weber house. Okay, this is Weisenthal. Weisenthal is a German word which means wheat valley, or the dale of wheat, the dale meaning a valley. And it was owned by Johann Anton Weber. Now, this is on the left side. You can't actually see the house from the road. The house sits on another road, but the fields between the house and the Strasbourg Road are part of the Wheat Valley. On the right side of the road, of Strasbourg Road, the Longenecker family were beginning to raise their family over there. So that's kind of a central stop, and one of the last stops that we know today as being completely German. Once we start leaving here, we start getting into the town of Lancaster. Once we get out of here, we go another about 3 miles, and we come to what is today the Lincoln Highway, or 462. It was originally called Route 30, and the Lincoln Highway before that. At the Lincoln Highway is where the Landis family decided to settle, and we turn left there, and we go through what is today Bridgeport to get to Lancaster. When we get down to the Conestoga Creek, there was a ford there, and the ford is a very shallow area where you could cross fairly easy. It wasn't until 1795 that the Whitmers built a stone bridge over the creek. So up until then, they had to cross the ford and go up what today is some people call the Poorhouse Hill. On the left side of the river, after you cross the river, on the left side, 5 years after the Brubakers came, Dr. Neff is on the left side. Down along the creek is where he bought his property, and he was the only doctor in the area for a number of years. On the right side of, after you get over the Conestoga Creek, is the place that they used to call Indian Town, and not Indian Town, Hickory Town. There was about 6 Native American houses in that area, and Hickory Town gave its name to Lancaster in the beginning, and Lancaster only became the name of it in 1725 or 1729 when it became a legitimate town of the government. So they had to go through Lancaster. Lancaster at that time only had about 30 people or 30 families living in the whole area of what we call Lancaster today. So it was very sparse. It was being broken up into lots, but there were not many people living there. After you get to the west side of Lancaster, you have a split in the road where you have Route 23 going north. You have the Marietta Avenue going south, and the Harrisburg Avenue going kind of northwest. And the Harrisburg Avenue is where we're going to find the Brubaker family deciding to homestead. Do we have some more pictures? Let's see what else we have. This is a picture of an old potty chair from 1795 that was in the Brubaker family, my Brubaker family. And Isaac Brubaker owned it before my grandmother, which was her father. And it is now on display at the Joseph Priestley house. Joseph Priestley was one of the founders of America, and his wife, Mary Priestley, was bedridden for a few years, and she used this potty chair, one exactly like this, from 1793 when she became bedridden. There's also 2 Chippendale chairs that match it, and a table at the end of her bed in this room. This one was restored and taken up there. So if you ever want to see one of the oldest Brubaker pieces to still exist, You could go visit the Priestley house and see this. Go to the next picture, and we have Isaac Brubaker's car of 1917. I thought not too many old cars are around these days with pictures even. And Isaac standing there with his wife sitting in the car. The next picture is the Isaac Brubaker house on State Road. This is my family, and it no longer exists. The Kelly Cadillac sits there now on the property. The next picture is the Hayden Brubaker family, Mr. and Mrs. Hayden, and I'm not even sure how they tie to us, but that's a typical picture of the 1800s. You can go up to the next one, and we have Harry in his riding outfit. So that will be the end of my talk. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and hope you enjoyed it.
The next agenda on our item is an interview that Doug Brubaker, actually he is our vice president of the Brubaker board, is interviewing Elaine Rankin. Elaine Rankin, many of you might know, she is our Brubaker historian, and there were many, many Brubakers during our 300th year anniversary that found her information was very, very helpful. Elaine Rankin had a very interesting experience recently, and let's listen to what she experienced.
Hi, my name is Elaine Rankin. I'm the historian for the Brubaker Families of America in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Back in March, we were contacted by a gentleman by the name of Tom DiPaolo. It seems he unearthed a small tombstone on his property, and he lives in Port Charlotte, Florida, and the stone is of Gillian P. Brubaker, 21-day-old baby boy. I usually find people on census records or in Find a Grave, but 21 days, Gideon wouldn't be found in those records. I was able to find information on Gideon in the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society in their card file, giving me Gideon's information and giving me his father and his mother. The notes are from Ferris Brubaker Gibble's book, the book that he wrote, The History of the Brubaker Family of America, and that's part of his notes. So Gideon P. Brubaker was born 20th of August 1863 and died the 11th of September 1863 during the Civil War era. The mystery about this is Gideon's parents, John Harrison Brubaker and Barbara Elizabeth Long, lived and died in Page County, Virginia, and they're all buried at the White House graveyard in the town of White House, Virginia. That's 897 miles from Florida. So how did Gideon's tombstone get so far away? We know he must be buried in White House because the proof is that Gideon had an older sister who died in 1854 in Page County. And the tombstones are exactly the same. Same design, same font, same carve. And here is Gideon's tombstone in Florida. And here's his sister, who's buried in Page County, Virginia. So we know that Gideon should be buried in Virginia. We need to get a hold of Virginia Brubakers to contact us with any information on the White House graveyard. This little mystery was reported on Fort Myers TV, WINK TV. I spoke with WINK news reporter Danielle Garcia, and she's very interested in us solving this mystery. The first thing we wanted to do was to go and bring Gideon's tombstone home, but the pandemic hit, so that's been on hold for now. In the meantime, I've been tracking down Gideon's living relatives, but the trail's gone cold. So we need to find someone who takes care of the White House graveyard so that when we do get Gideon home, we can put his tombstone back where it belongs. So stay tuned for the Brubacher website for the link to the newscast of WINK from Fort Myers. If you have any information, please contact us on our website, brubakerfamilies.org, or our Facebook page. And thank you to all of you, and be safe.
So our final presentation in our virtual reunion today is a video that was developed by our cousins in Canada. If you recall, I mentioned that we had our 98th reunion this year, celebration, and in 2 years, which means it's 2022, we will be celebrating our 100th year anniversary. And we're absolutely excited about the possibility of celebrating that with our Canadian cousins. So they're going to have a word of encouragement and I suppose marketing the value of coming to Canada and visit cousins who may have not met before, but also it's probably a very good place for family vacation, so you can possibly manage those two together. So let's listen to Andrew Brubaker share a little bit about Canada.
Greetings from your Canadian Brubaker cousins. We are excited to be hosting the 100th annual Brubaker reunion. The reunion will be held in Kitchener, Ontario, which is the location of the first Brubaker homestead in Ontario. It is interesting to note that Kitchener was first called Ebytown, named after Bishop Benjamin Eby, whose wife was Maria Brubaker, the first Brubaker to come to Canada from Pennsylvania. The event will be held at Rockway Mennonite Collegiate. The program will start on Friday, and there will be something for everyone. The program will be attractive for all ages, and there will be a children's program that will include a tour to the Kitchener Science Center. There will be interesting presentations and options for leisure time, where one may want to check out one of the local parks. There will be tours to some of the local historical sites, such as Brubaker House, a restored home of a second-generation Canadian Brubaker, Pioneer Village and the tower dedicated to early pioneers from Pennsylvania, the St. Jacob's Market, and the West Montrose Kissing Bridge. The event will conclude with a Sunday morning service at the First Mennonite Church in Kitchener, which was founded by Benjamin Eby and his wife, Maria Brubaker. John Brubaker, Maria's brother, was the first male Brubaker settler and also the first deacon at the church. In the cemetery behind the church, one can find the headstones for many of the first Brubaker pioneers. When coming to Ontario for the reunion, you'll want to take the opportunity to do some sightseeing at some of the great attractions that Ontario has to offer, such as Niagara Falls, Toronto, and all of the attractions that go with being the third largest metropolitan city in North America. If there are any young people in your group, you will want to consider Canada's Wonderland and all the thrills that it provides. Some of you will want to take advantage of the great vacation opportunities that the Muskoka Lakes region offers. Cottages and resorts are readily available. And then there are those of you that will not want to miss some of the best fishing adventures available anywhere. We will have a team ready to assist you in planning your trip, and we look forward to seeing you in 2022.
So we do appreciate your joining us today in our virtual reunion, and I do want to make a special thanks to all the participants in the reunion itself, as well as the board members who've been very involved in helping us to shape this meeting. And I'd especially like to mention Doug Brubaker, who is our IT person, and he's been really, really helpful in getting us together. And finally, and most important, I'd like to mention Mitch McKinney, who happens to be Connor's father. He has been the glue that really kept us together and gotten us into a seamless meeting. So thanks everyone for your help. At the end of the meeting, immediately after this meeting, we did get an ID meeting number from Zoom. So we would invite anybody that's interested in joining us on Zoom. Now, you should get the should have gotten the ID number from Doug in his most recent email that he sent to everybody. So that's what you click on. It'll take you right into Zoom. If you've never been in Zoom before, the Zoom company actually walks you through downloading the Zoom app, and so that will then let you in. So join us. It's a time to maybe ask questions to Dennis Oberholtzer about his sessions that he had. But any kind of interesting thing that you want to share about your family would be fine as well. So come and join us, and we'll be together hopefully at least 40 minutes, if not more. Thanks again, everybody, and wish you a safe life in the next ensuing months while we fight the COVID-19 virus. Blessings.